This is my prototype walkthrough for an AI integrated scenario um, that uses the experiential learning cycle. And it is a provisional diagnosis scenario. The learners are advanced psychology students who are at the end of their program and have already had instruction in the skills and procedures they have to apply. So, this is for right before they're entering the workforce. The goal overall is to conduct a realistic client intake and gather necessary information to make a provisional diagnosis and provide justification. There are 5 objectives that culminate from their overall program. The first one is to analyze Maya's presenting concerns through professional intake questioning. The second one is to evaluate additional evidence and explain how results influence reasoning. Third, they differentiate bipolar 2 disorder from a plausible alternative explanation. Third is to differentiate the bipolar 2 disorder diagnosis from plausible alternative explanations. The fourth one is to justify a cautious single best provisional diagnosis and create a next step plan. And the last one is to revise or extend their reasoning after feedback using evidence based clinical judgment. The experiential learning process goes through phases, and this is how the scenario works through each one. So they start with a concrete experience, which is an intake, and they have to do everything they would in a real world experience, including interview the client Maya. They have to gather evidence and they have to make a provisional decision. Then, for reflective observation, first, they have an opportunity to review all of their evidence. Then, after they submit their reflection, they get individualized feedback, and then they reflect on the feedback. Then the next phase is abstract conceptualization. The feedback helps connect them to choices that include professional principles and criteria. The last one, active experimentation, it occurs after they go through the reflection, abstract conceptualization, and revise their reasoning in response to the feedback they received. And then ultimately, they would transfer these skills to a new case, applying what they've learned. This is the client interface, which is designed to look like a provider portal. It has intake paperwork that our client Maya filled out before she came in. So the first step for the learners is to open her intake paperwork. It has some clues as to what may be going on and her medical overview, her reasons for coming, the reasons for her referral, and there are 2 broad screeners at the bottom. Then also up here under the client name, it shows the phases of the learning process and where they are in the scenario. This is not the experiential learning process. They also have a section where they can keep notes because they will be getting information from her interview, from assessment screeners, and other places, and they'll need to keep track of that in order to justify their provisional diagnosis. So, as they begin the concrete experience, the first 2 steps are that they conduct an interview and request assessments. So, I'll show you a few examples of how this works. So, hi Maya, thanks for meeting with me. Can you tell me what's been going on lately and what feels most concerning right now? Lately, I haven't been feeling like myself. I've been really stressed and depressed, especially since my ex Eric and I broke up. I'm just going to post some questions in here just to show you some examples. What are the depressed periods like and how long do they usually last? The depressed periods usually last a few weeks. I cry a lot, feel exhausted and guilty, lose motivation, pull away from people, and have trouble concentrating. Work and responsibilities feel much deeper. Do you ever have periods where you have a lot of extra energy? Yeah, I do have times where I feel wired, restless, and more active or intense than usual. I get swept up in ideas and feel like I need to do things right away. It can feel good at first, but I don't feel quite like my normal self. So I would work through this interview process, and then I would start requesting screeners and assessments that would give me more information about her symptoms. There are 4 ways that learners can request assessments. First, they can just ask what assessments or screeners are available, and it will provide them with a catalog of all of the assessments and screeners they can use. And note, all of these are not needed, but they have to select which ones will give them the information that they need. It provides the results and they can look over it. Another way is they can ask for a screener or an assessment by name. And then another option is they can ask for specific symptoms or patterns that they want to test. It will tell them available assessments in those areas, and they can ask for those directly. If they ask for an assessment or screener that is not available, it gives them an alternative. It says that exact measure is not available or is unavailable. The mood episode history follow-up is available as a clinically related option. Would you like for Maya to complete it? Yes. And then there's some hidden information that they may find if they think about it, and they can simply ask Maya, have you had any recent lab work or medical tests related to sleep problems, fatigue, or mood changes? She says, yeah, my primary doctor ran some blood work recently, and I brought the results with me. Would you like to see them? I'm going to say yes. And these labs would help rule out medical causes for any of her symptoms, like thyroid disorder. After the learners feel they've collected all the information they need from Maya and her screeners or assessments, they click End Interview, Make Decision. At this point, they begin the reflective observation. They're given an option to review the test that they ordered, and they can type show all or the name of the test, or just next if they want to. But this allows them an opportunity to go back through the assessments and make any notes that maybe they need to include. The first thing it does is asks me a reflection question. Briefly document where you requested or reviewed additional results before making your provisional diagnostic. If you requested or reviewed additional assessments, screening your labs or other results, explain why you chose them and whether they changed, strengthened, or did not change your diagnostic thinking. And then the same question for if you didn't, and explain why. So I'm going to put her evidence rationale in. It then goes through a series of 5 prompts. It asks me to commit and identify the best diagnosis. I'm intentionally making this a little bit skinny so it'll get some good feedback here. It immediately saves it, and the prompts continue. They have to continue justification, what information supports your provisional diagnosis. Then it asks them what differential diagnoses they considered and why they're still possible if they need more information. It asks them if they feel there is important information that's still missing or uncertain, and explain what they need to clarify next, or why they have all the information that they need. And then lastly, it asks them for their next steps. And after they finish this one, they get the initial feedback from the clinical supervisor. And that's because we don't want to give them answers or clues yet. They get a pretty robust amount of feedback that comes from the clinical supervisor, and it's based on rubrics that I have uploaded into a database where it pulls the rules. It gives them an outcome level they're developing, an overview of feedback. It tells them their strengths, and then what they need strengthen. So these are the things that are needed for them to revise their plan. And it tells them some things that they're doing well, and then they are asked to reflect on the feedback above, identify what you gathered well, what information remains missing or uncertain, which would be some of these things in the areas to strengthen, and how that affects your provisional diagnosis, and what you would maintain or strengthen if the intake continued. So this is their first attempt. So next, they get feedback on their reflection. And it's saying you accurately recognize this, that, and then it says before you're writing your revision, you will have a chance to follow up on assessment or interview information connected to the feedback and your reflection. So in other words, if they left something out that they need to go back and add, they can ask Maya additional questions, or they can request additional screeners. So at this point, it's asking one assessment or result that they would request. So I'm adding an assessment that I feel like would strengthen my information for my rationale. And I'm not going to ask any other ones, but I will ask Maya some follow-up questions. Then I'm going to continue. It tells me a little summary of what I did. Now revise your provisional formulation. This is where we're going back into the abstract conceptualization, because they're going to respond to the feedback from the clinical supervisor. And then CareLink is helping them connect their choices to professional principles. So it's asking them to revise and use the original information they gathered, and whether it still fits or whether another provisional formulation is more defensible, and then how the new information changes, strengthens, or limits their differential reasoning. It provides feedback again, but it tells them what's missing. You haven't yet revised your written reasoning to make clear which support details are grounded in Maya's responses or assessment information and which require further clarification. The task is to draft the differential section itself, showing how you would weigh those alternatives with the current information. So now you are on attempt 2 of 3. They have up to 3 attempts to revise based on the feedback. Then they're going into the active experimentation process, because what they're doing is they're making revisions to their assessment, and then they're having to explain their new plan until they fulfill all the rubric criteria. So it said you clearly revised your differential reasoning. Essentially, you did a good job, and now you've completed everything that you need to do. And it provides final feedback. One of the things that's included in the final feedback that they're not spoon fed is what assessment information could have strengthened their formulation. So, additional assessments they may have considered to um, collect more details. Strengths to carry forward, areas to strengthen in future cases, and this area is complete. Now from here, they would go on to a new task to transfer what they've learned into a new scenario process. Just a little detail about what kind of setup I used with the AI. This is a retrieval augmented generation setup. And basically, what that means is that I have a database, and the system pulls approved content from it based on flags that I create. And the case content, prompt instructions, routing, response rules, rubrics, coding, all of that is in that database. So the advantages of this are it adds a strong control mechanism and that it addresses several ethical concerns. So, because you are providing all of that content for the AI, it offers transparency, accountability, explainability, and it is a form of human oversight. The disadvantages of creating a RAG system is that it requires extensive testing. It's also time consuming and it's more technical. But for now, this is what I'm experimenting with to see if this is feasible. And it sounds like a strong option for scenario based learning using the experiential learning cycle.